Monday, November 22nd. And if we could have a roll call, please, Dennis?
Mr. Buckenset.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Coronado.
Here.
Mr. Iteraria.
Here.
Mr. Newfinky.
Here.
Mr. Metcalf.
Here.
Mr. Ranville.
Here.
Mr. Samuelson.
Here.
Mr. Straopoulos.
And we do have a quorum here. We have before us the agenda. And are there any revisions suggested? Any reorganization of it?
It's too long.
Too long. Just try to move fast. Not editorial comment at this point. All right. Seeing none at all, we're ahead of schedule. The second item is goal and agenda for December 6th neighborhood meeting. And this is the neighborhood in the downtown area that we discussed at some length last time. Some copies of items that we want to address with the neighbors. And I should note we do have one of the residents from that neighborhood here tonight with us. Everyone is always welcome. All right, meeting with Old Downtown Neighborhood. And this, again, is scheduled for December 6th. I believe it's in this room.
It is, starting at 7.
And again, will be televised. Do you want to go over this?
Sure.
All right, Dennis?
What we were thinking we would do would be just check with you tonight, make sure that we've got this correctly, representing what you want to say. Two things particularly. One is the vision for that neighborhood, as you discussed at the last meeting, and we talked about the last couple of years, and then also the changes are required to meet that vision. What have we talked about in terms of what changes we require to either the standards and guidelines or to the zoning, and kind of leave that open as to how we approach that. But the things that are significant enough that we thought we should get some feedback from the neighbors, property owners, the residents, the folks from that neighborhood. The vision is the old downtown neighborhood will retain its existing character. That is a sense of small structures with primarily residential uses that allows medical and dental offices in existing houses. Expansion of existing structures will be limited to maintain the sense of small buildings, which will be articulated according to the downtown design standards and guidelines. In no case can buildings exceed 35 feet. So that's the vision. And then we talked about what does it take to get there. And the three things that we talked about was no house can be demolished for medical or dental use. If a house is deemed irreparably structurally unsound, it can be replaced by a structure that has generally the same size, massing, and articulation. The second thing is dental and medical offices are intended to fit with the character of the neighborhood. Therefore, expansion will be limited to 30% of the size of the original building. And the third thing is planned development overlay projects will not be allowed to exceed the 35-foot height limit. Therefore, structures will be limited to 2 stories because of pitched roof requirements found in the downtown design standards and guidelines. It differs from what we've seen in the rest of downtown, and we've talked about some height limits for those areas, but in all cases, those tend to be either right at the allowed minimum height in the CA, such as along Main Street, or higher than. So the assumption is if they go through the design guidelines, the PDO process, they could go higher. This is one place where we say you really can't go higher than the minimum height limit, or maximum height limit, rather, excuse me, in the CA district. So that's the big distinction. This, plus we're really reducing one of the uses which the medical and dental office use. And then we also talked about a fourth thing, which we should probably mention, that is limiting the commercial parking lots that we had talked about as well. So we have those 4 things that we should be talking about. So, are we on the right track with this is kind of what we want to say. Are there any details that you think are wrong? Yeah, go ahead.
When you say same size, massing, and articulation, I may have an idea of what you mean, but it's going to take a definition to get there. I guess the question that I really do have for you is there wording that we could substitute that we use more often than those 3?
Okay.
Because, I think of
Square footage or
square footage or setbacks or
height,
building envelope, et cetera, things that I think
length
are,
of walls, whatever.
because now with this set of definitions, and then you're going to still have those out there as well, and people won't necessarily figure that they're both really trying to say the same thing.
Okay, good.
And, or whatever you mean by same size, I'd like you to, that'd take a little stronger, and same thing for massing and articulation.
Okay.
That's one word that I get a little bit, it's very subjective, I should say.
Okay.
Commissioners, anybody else? Oh, Jenny, yes.
For me, as far as what's in the R5, I'm not necessarily in favor of making it more restrictive, unless that's something that as a consensus that all the commissioners, in the sense of limiting it to only 2 stories, when this is technically R5 is the highest density, even though this is a special neighborhood we're looking at specifically. And so I'm not, unless it's something that the neighbors really feel that that they want to have this continue to be more restrictive, but just something that I wanted to throw in there.
David?
Understanding that the zoning right now only allows a maximum 30 feet high.
Right, although someone
With the same density.
exactly, but I know someone can push it to 3 stories with that height, even though it may not look.
Well, and a larger project like Nevada Place, you can go through the PDO process too and get greater height, so.
So the change in this case that we're talking about here is raising the height limit by 5 feet.
Right.
Not making it more restrictive.
No, but actually limiting it to 2 stories is more restrictive, is it not?
Well, you're not going to get 3 stories in 30 feet, not with sloped roofs, so,
But it's 35 now, though, isn't
no,
it?
it's 30.
30.
Is it
It's
30 now? Oh,
It's
sorry.
30 right now,
Oops.
yeah.
I thought I just looked at that. sorry.
Not that, but I think having 35 feet allows for more opportunities for the roof design. Because someone can put a 3-story building in 30 feet, and they can do it with 35 feet as well. It just will look better if it's 35 feet. So, but anyway, I guess I'm not necessarily in favor in limiting it to 2 stories unless that's the consensus.
Yes, my recollection from input, I think basically the survey that we sent out is that indeed people were comfortable with holding more or less what you see when you drive down the street in that the pitched roof requirement, 35 limit. We struggled with that. There's a lot of areas, including apartment building I do work in occasionally, that is just a flat-roofed cube, basically, and you have the older bungalow-style houses still interspersed. This is down in the neighborhood of Denver Country Club. To me, it's not comfortable nor attractive. I wouldn't want to live in a single-family house and have 3 stories overlooking my yard when I used to have, another bungalow next to me, maybe a 2nd story back here.
In which case, we could go back to what we talked about 9 months ago, and that's starting to look at trying to govern the discrepancy, the difference in heights of adjacent properties, rather than the absolute 30 or 35 pitched roof or not. I guess in general, I understand what we're trying to do with all 3 of these points. I'm not sure I'm really crazy about the way we're going about it, even though it sounded like I was arguing with you, Jenny. Overall, I'm not sure I don't agree with you on the overall point. When we start telling people that if your house has a structural problem, burns down, or otherwise, you have to replace it with the same house, which is what same size massing and articulation generally is going to lead to. Now, if you've got a big house or a big structure on there, you're in Fat City. If you've got a little one and had an opportunity to expand it, that might be seen as an unreasonable restriction, an inequitable restriction compared to somebody else in that residential zone. Expansion limited to 30% really says the same thing.
Especially if you're allowed to expand your medical office by 30%, but you can't expand your little house, 800-square-foot bungalow by.
Well, I think the intent was here that you the only things that would be limited to the 30% expansion, would be the medical and dental offices.
Right, but if I have a house next door to it, you aren't going to let me expand it
Why not?
because of item 1.
It's not saying anywhere here that you can't expand a residential unit.
Oh,
If a house is
Why
deemed
would we restrict
irreparably
it?
structured, it can be
Well,
replaced
that-
by structure generally the
okay.
same size, massing, and articulation. That doesn't,
I do hear what you're saying, and it's written incorrectly, because my understanding was that this was no house can be demolished. However, if that house that you're proposing to be used for medical or dental office is deemed irreparably structurally unsound. So that's only talking about houses that you're proposing to use. We're talking about, we've had houses that have been converted to medical and dental office. So you're saying you can't tear down one of the houses there now for medical and dental, and if it is unsound, and we had one of those where we had a house the doctor went into, started to renovate it, it was unsound, she had to tear it down, and so she replaced it with a house that was comparable, and that's what this is intending to say. So we need to add in that second sentence, this is only for medical and dental.
How about it change that sentence,
Publish it.
instead of if a house, how about if that house, referring to the house demolished for medical or dental use?
Sure, or if a house that is proposed for medical and dental office or something, yeah, sure,
Yep, I guess that was my understanding, that
for dental use, yeah, okay.
mostly we're restricting expansion or a radical expansion of that medical or dental use. And the current situation, the current considerations for single-family houses stays about the same.
Yes.
okay, then I've got another question on item 3.
Okay.
What would you call a house with an upstairs, a downstairs, and a livable attic? 3 stories or 2 stories?
I would call it 2.5.
Does it matter?
It does in this.
Well, if you already have it, you're in good shape. If you don't have it, you don't.
So
it's
if I don't have it,
But, and I guess it's a 35 feet, and I guess when you get into the standards and guidelines, you can put in a maximum wall height, you could put in other things, and you could still determine at that point, do you want them to have 2.5 stories, you with a livable attic, do you want them to have a finished basement? Do you really care about that, or are you trying to keep the scales?
One of the things that I'm seeing that's missing in this is the fact that it really doesn't take into account the assumptions that we have made and continue to try to make for this particular area. What I thought was the assumption of last time we met, and I don't know them all, but I will say the ones that I remember. One, the primary use of this was to remain residential, and to keep it in such a way that, we went even a step farther at the last time, saying that the R5 was not the best zoning category for it. So in other words, part of the implementation of this, or a given, would be that you need to change it to something a little bit more comparable to what's out there from an existing point of view. Then we got into the conversation about how close from the property line where the houses needed to be, et cetera. And the concept was that we were going to try to keep a single-family, detached, residential community stay the same, just like we would do in any other part of the city that has residential. That's my editorial comment to it, but I want to parameter that because in reality, I'm trying to make this place, this area, no different than anybody to the east or west of downtown that has residential. Just like I'd be, in other words, yeah, that's exactly, and there are certain things that I'm seeing that you could do citywide, which this would also could include in here, could be part of that, as part of the umbrella, and then something specific to this one that is a little bit more, if you will, down to the grass nubs of what's going on here.
Let me see.
Does that make any sense? I'm looking around, I've got some blank faces that I'm looking at, but I want to make sure that.
I guess what I was, go ahead, Craig.
I think it's a really important point that Julio brings up, especially going into a down residents meeting on December 6th. Perhaps there's other mechanisms besides fine-tuning the R5 for this neighborhood to either redefine the R5 citywide or apply a different zoning to it.
And I think that's where we're headed. What this says, what Julio's saying, I think what I'm saying, and Jenny, we're going to diverge here, I think, is even though it says R5 and it's a denser zoning, that's not where we're headed. That's not what we heard a year and a half ago from public comment. That's not what we've been working for the last year and a half. Now it's just a question of how do we put the details together in a way that's equitable and consistent. Last week, we were hoping we could avoid having to do a rezoning because of the convolutions that gets us into. I think it's fairly apparent from what we're saying, what we're seeing here and what we're saying tonight, that's no longer a possibility.
Well, and I guess
Let me jump in for just a second.
okay, I was just going to summarize.
Before we go any further, so would you add a fifth item then? 4 was involved parking lots, so we've added that, and we need to discuss that a little more. That was parking lots used remotely for any given business, which implies tearing down a house or tearing down some structure and paving that lot in this area. So number 5, I think let me try to summarize, and you can analyze mine.
And I will critique your summary.
Very good. A fifth item under changes required to meet the vision, that is, consider a recommendation to council regarding a zoning change or a rezoning that preserves the residential character.
No.
Okay?
No. That's not what I was really trying to do. I was trying to lead up to that. But what this is missing is what my original statement was. It really misses what I consider to be the assumptions that we were trying to project for this community. And those assumptions, to me, were pretty much what was here, but there's certain things that are missing. And I'd like, before we get into the 1 through 4 or 5 or whatever that is, I wanted to see that kind of reflected more in the vision, because I think they're more of a vision situation where you put your givens or where your intent, it has to be in your vision area rather than somewhere below. Now, one of the things that you're talking about is when you start to say, Norm, about possibly going and changing the rezoning and stuff, that's something that I would probably say would be a recommendation of implementation to preserve this vision and goal, if you will. That's what I was trying to get at.
So what language, or anybody else, what would you put under the vision at the very top of the page we have here? Dennis read it. Old downtown neighborhood will retain its existing residential character?
Well, he has it. At first I didn't think he had it where it says retain its existing character, and then it kind of says colon. Is that a colon?
Yes.
Yeah. And then a sense of small structures with primarily residential uses. To me, that primary really needs to be strengthened and put up on that first line, to be quite honest with you, somehow. And I don't know, I really don't care how you want to wordsmith it. But the point is, and then the secondary, like you said here, that allows for medical and dental, to me, that's the secondary use. It's not the primary. I don't want somebody to think that they can just walk in there. Because when I drive here, it feels like home. I look around as I'm just even driving up any of the side streets or even Prince, you see a tremendous amount of commercial, residential, intermixed, that are kind of going off on their own tangent, whatever that is. And yet, to some degree, I would even like to go a step farther, and I hope people are listening for our next meeting. I would like to know whether or not they think that we should continue with the medical and dental offices, or really keep it a primary residential area. Now, I'm not going to say that, I'm hard bent one way or the other, because I'm not, but I want to listen first. I want to give them something that they can either react to positively or negatively. I'm not affected one way or the other. I just want to get people to speak to this issue And hopefully they can do it in a way that we can understand them and try to figure out which way we're going to go.
Well, let me try some language maybe. The old downtown neighborhood will retain its existing residential character, a sense of small structures with primarily residential uses that allow as a secondary use medical and dental offices in existing houses. Is that kind of getting where you want to go?
Shifting the emphasis.
Yeah, just shifting. Well, making the emphasis clearer, I think that's what I was, because that's where I thought we were at the last meeting. Now, that's all arguable no matter what, because a lot of folks haven't been here either, so I'm not going to close that door, but I think that it's just important that we try to get out there what we're thinking currently.
I think the significant distinction between all the alternatives we tried to consider last week and in previous meetings is we finally bitten the bullet. It's no longer going to be a multifamily, high-density neighborhood, which is why we're going to have to talk to council about a rezoning. If we're talking about single-family, two-story, whatever, only limited medical, dental, then it's not an R5 anymore. It's not even an R3.
Okay, I think we need to check that because I've not heard single-family. I've heard the single-family character, but we have duplexes, we have a triplex, so we've got some larger structures in there. And I thought that the sense was go ahead and allow that additional density as long as you maintain the sense of smaller structures.
Well, that's based upon the fact that what has been there already. And I guess I'm leaning toward what's already been there.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if somebody does have a duplex or a triplex and something has it and he wants to go and rebuild it, that's no big deal.
So basically, it's an R3X with medical, dental.
But no more?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not
So
crossing that gap
Yeah.
yet.
So basically, what we're headed towards here is an R3X with medical, dental use.
Sounding like.
Because if you limit new construction to 2 stories, there won't be any multifamily houses built. It isn't going to happen. Economically, it's not feasible.
The existing character of that neighborhood is primarily single-family homes. There are some duplexes and triplexes in there, but the
Minimal.
But the existing character of the neighborhood is a single-family detached homes.
What we've been headed for at least a year is, yes, with downtown, especially with light rail, trying to get more rooftops around the retail, the commercial area, has been a goal that we heard from the community. What we've been trying to say is in this one particular area, we're not going to try and cram all those goals into the whole central area. We're not going to do it here. R5, the residents said, look, we like it, the look and feel the way it is. We saw that they have put their money where their mouth is by remodeling, upgrading the property, so they are dedicated to the idea. So, yes, we're trying to find a way for the entire central area to increase rooftops and residential, but not in this neighborhood.
Let me ask a couple of questions here. One about the number of stories. If we change the language a little bit, under item 3, second sentence, it says, therefore, structures will be limited to 2 stories because of, how about, therefore, structures may be limited to 2 stories, which kind of gets to your 2.5-story livable attic question. Some attics that don't really meet the height requirements are indeed used, for kids' rooms or for, something more than just storage. You can't get away from that. People tend to use those spaces when they can. If you change that to will be limited to may be limited, does that help with sort of a vague area about the number of stories allowed?
Well, what's really kind of vague, and I'm going to chime in on this thing kind of from a different point of view, because now we're talking about PDOs and what their part of the regulation says. And since somebody over here, Dave, has a book, and if you went to the PDO section, it gives some instructions there that are quite specific. And then if we're going to make exceptions to that, now we've talked about 2 codes or 2 regulations that we need to deal with. And so I don't know, we're compounding the problem a wee bit. And I don't know if I feel comfortable with that yet or not. I guess if it was me, And if I was here and somebody was to come in with a PDO in what I classify as the old downtown neighborhood, and they wanted to get they probably would not get a favorable recommendation from me based on something if they were looking for more than the existing regulation could give it. And we don't even know what that existing regulation would look like at that time. But again, residential character, things of that sort. And I guess I would be pretty firm on that position. But, you know, it's one thing to say you're not going to let anything on the PDO go greater than 35 feet. That's one element. But then to say the structures of 2 stories, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, if somebody's going to do 2.5 or whatever and come up with a 3-story time, and it's got a flat roof, I probably would vote against that too. Just because of the fact that it's not harmonious with the neighborhood. You know, it's kind of it totally goes against what I consider to be part of that neighborhood and character.
Would the design standards allow a flat roof in that neighborhood?
No.
No. So if we
That's
made a state,
Their standards.
As they are, they wouldn't.
no.
the pitched roof requirements.
So 35 feet in a pitched roof, you're not going to get over, you could get that 3rd story in this very limited.
It's probably
third
kind of a little
story.
bit too technical for what I'm thinking about at this point in time. I think you're absolutely correct if you leave it, you know, if somebody wants to be really creative and gamble, you know, once we have a couple more things in place, like this done and something that we're calling old townhouse neighborhood zoning, you know, and whatever that is, and not knowing what that is makes it tougher to conclude, but I'd have to say, yeah, I'd probably be more on the conservative side. That's what I'm thinking.
So are we limiting to 2 stories, or are we allowing something creative?
I think we leave it at 35. If a guy comes in here and try to push his luck, you know, then he might get favorable and he may not.
Okay.
I would,
We go through and kind of do a checklist in terms of where we are and see. So residential character, is that?
Hang on just a second, Dennis. Steve was going to weigh in.
I would be in favor of on number 3, where it says therefore structures will be limited, would be, may be limited
Okay.
to 2 stories.
Or do
Because
we
that would
want- Or we could take
Just take
that.
out the new sentence.
take out will and put may, and I think that settles what everybody was talking about.
Or take out that whole sentence.
You want to take the sentence out?
Just take the whole bloody sentence out.
That's good with me.
Yeah, because otherwise, it's a toss-up. Somebody coming in to look at it says, okay, so what's it going to be?
They're not
2 or 3?
options at that point.
I have no way of knowing.
Let's do that. Okay. Okay. Seemed like we kind of had agreement on that.
So residential character, anybody who doesn't agree with that? Okay. Should we add that as single-family residential character? Or just residential or low-scale residential? Let's do,
Well, because of the fact that, like we said, we have duplexes and a couple of, well, we have a triplex in there too, I think. I don't know. I know we have duplexes. I don't know what the greater number is.
I like what it says in here is existing residential character.
okay, existing residential character, anybody?
Okay, wait a minute. We're starting to get coy. We're talking around it so we don't commit. Okay? Either it's going to be single-family residential, or it's not.
Well, that's the next point. Let's let him.
But
get
yeah,
to
but he
number
was
2.
trying to work it into that one. That's what I'm saying.
What about primarily single-family?
I like it.
We've got existing, we've got primarily. Well, let's go into the details and see what that means, shall we? Okay, single family only, is that, how many people think is that where everybody wants to go, or most people want to go? Single family, okay. So not,
If I was to do a percentage,
okay,
would it not be that the single family in that neighborhood is like 80% and the duplexes and?
probably 75-25, something like that, yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
So what is it that we like about the single-family setup in the neighborhood? The look, the feel, the density, what is it?
I was going to say the appearance.
Yes.
Okay, so it isn't necessarily single-family.
Right.
It's back to some, closer to what Dennis was mentioned a minute ago, and that's the lower scale residential character. If somebody could come in, put a parcel of 3 lots together and could do cluster housing that was separated, articulated, low rise, smaller scale, fit in with the character, why forestall that by saying it's going to be more single family the way it is primarily right now? If we're not going to allow that, if we want to keep it single family, one house on one lot, let's say it. Don't be coy about it, don't talk around it, just do it.
I think we agreed that we aren't going to use the phrase single family. Nobody really seemed to be in favor of keeping it to only single family. If anybody is, raise your hand.
But we started making references to it like existing, and then started talking about, well, 75 or 80% of the houses there are single family.
Existing
We're talking
character.
around it, we're trying to accomplish the thing.
Existing character, not existing single family.
Then why mention the fact that 80% of the houses are single family?
That was just a question.
Oh, we did mention it.
Yes, he just asked a question about what the ratio was now, and we had,
And why does that matter?
because we need to understand. Somebody wanted to understand. What do you got over there now? Duplex, triplex compared to single
One or
family?
two,
But we aren't going to use the phrase single
So
family because we
then
didn't
what
want
I'm hearing, I think, is people are saying you're okay with additional duplexes or triplexes as long as it maintains that appearance. Is that, okay? So get rid of this existing only on duplex and triplex? Okay? So then we can allow new, duplex, we're talking about appearance. Okay? Height, 35-foot maximum, we're talking about that. I think everybody's okay with that, or do we have some people that are concerned about that? Is anybody
I'm
concerned?
still on the fence.
Are you?
30
Okay.
and 35.
Oh, 33, okay.
actually, the way you had
I'm not
it,
going anyhow. I don't think I do.
the way you had it listed in these points, Dennis, you could read it as saying the 35 only applied to the PDO, allowing up to
interesting.
35.
Okay.
Now, that's
Interesting. That's a good point, okay. So, yeah, I think the intent was that everybody would get up to 35, I think. So I think we're talking about.
That wasn't clear from the point.
No, it
did
wasn't,
just
you're
address
right.
PDO.
You're right, absolutely. Two-story maximum or greater than 2 stories? Because I've heard, 2.5, whatever you can get in that 35, let's go for that. So how many people think it should be limited to 2 stories?
I think we agreed we were going to take that second sentence out that involved structure.
Okay.
So, is that right?
Okay, so
That's-
no,
So that's a no.
so basically if it's flat roof, you could do 3, we don't care as long as it's 35.
Well-
Except with the design guidelines, you're going to say you can't do a flat roof, so, okay, gotcha, okay. Okay, so we've got 35-foot maximum. Medical, dental, existing only or new okay in existing houses? Go for existing only. How many people think it should be limited to existing only?
I think that's a question sort of for the neighborhood, because I could go either way. I'd like to hear what
Yeah, I
they,
want to get an answer for some of these.
yeah. And
I don't want to preclude that meeting by coming up with an opinion.
not right now. That's a very specific question for anybody that we can solicit an answer from.
And my caution on that one would be impact. A new one, where is it going to go? What impact is it going to have on the adjacent residences? If we can control that, that's one thing.
So is that then talking about either in existing houses or in new medical, or possibly what we talked about before was reducing the maximum size? 'Cause right now you can do up to 10,000 square feet. So we talked at one point about reducing that down to something else, less than 10,000. So it means you could build a new building, but it could be less than 10,000.
But what I
So,
recall
okay.
too is the fact that we said it could be limited to the setbacks
Right.
of the existing area. So whatever is concluded to be the setbacks, because every one of those lots are really different in size.
They are. We have not prohibited assemblages. So you could potentially assemble.
But I want
Right.
to talk about that too.
Okay.
So,
Because we had talked earlier, I thought pretty specifically we were not going to do that. So my pen's drying out, sorry.
so do we have, are we going to leave
Finish
that?
this in terms of, so this is, am I hearing that we don't want to do anything in medical dental until we've had the meeting and kind of say, how do you feel about it in terms of size, in terms of number, in terms of impact, and all the characteristics that come up with medical dental?
I think when we bring that up, we need to make sure that they understand what the built-in limitations are on something
Okay.
like that, including setbacks, including on-site parking requirements, that sort of thing.
Right.
Right.
So is there anybody that disagrees with that, leaving it until we talk to the neighbors? Okay. And then the last thing is assemblage. I thought we'd eliminated it before. At one point, we'd said no assemblage, and then I thought at the last meeting, we said we weren't going to limit the number of assemblages, thinking that it's unlikely we'll get any, and we'd cover it with other things in terms of the standards and guidelines that actually talk about what does it look like, so we get that appearance.
For next week too, or what next?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree for the meeting.
I want to wait and see what they got planned.
Take a real quick pulse. Are we worried about assemblages when somebody's talking about residential structures that mimic what's out there? Or are we worried about assemblages that takes the limits off on new medical dental? Isn't it really just the latter that we're really concerned about?
I don't know yet.
No.
Really? Okay. So what could you do in the way of residential with an assemblage that isn't already constrained by what we have out on the table? Medical dental is different. We're saying the limitation on medical dental is largely the setback or the parking requirements.
Right. Because what we've talked about in order to achieve this appearance of the lower scale, is that we're going to talk about in the standards and guidelines, making some changes to those where we'd have a maximum width of the facade. So there are different ways to approach that, but to try and achieve that. So it's a good question.
Well, the one thing that hits me on that, I was doing some more research on bicycle pathways, conflicts, that sort of thing today. And one of the things they keep talking about is one of the big risks for safe bicycle travel is the number of driveways and driveway cuts per mile. So if somebody comes in and does an assemblage, keeps the structures as small as the houses that are out there, but has it down to one driveway instead of 3 or 4, you are inherently making it safer for bicycles and pedestrians. So there are gains as well as any negatives. I don't see assemblage as being a risk except for the medical dental office size. And if we cut it down to 5,000 square foot max, that's kind of self-limiting too.
To answer your question,
I don't, that's it.
Really?
I think so. Unless there's one hiding over here someplace.
To answer your question, I think the problems that might arise from assemblages are probably dealt with in other considerations, so I'm not too concerned.
I've got one of my own.
And I think that, as Dennis said, that's where we were last time, basically. We decided maybe those weren't a big problem.
It just sounded like Julio was introducing assemblage as a chink in the armor about self-protection for medical dental.
I think, I have an opinion, but I want to wait until, I want to hear what they say.
Yep.
I really don't know, and I want
If we don't get a lot of input, then we'll just hash it out right here.
to, yeah, so be it.
Okay. What else?
That's what I did hear. Anything else that
Okay.
we haven't heard or we don't have up here?
What about the parking lot? I put that down as number 4.
Could you explain that, please?
Well, if I understand correctly, Dennis was referring to the use by a business of one of these lots for remote parking.
As a conditional use. So it is.
You're talking about off-street or off-site parking?
Right, off-street park, so basically commercial parking, so a commercial use or residential use somewhere else can have parking in the R5. It is a conditional use, so there's a conditional use review process already, but they could go in and possibly demolish, property in order to have off-site parking. So it is possible if they make it through the criteria of the conditional use. And that usually talks about, impact on and inconsistency with the character.
I have a fundamental issue with that. I always get nervous about having on a single dedicated lot, that the primary use on that lot is no longer whatever we have as number 1, but now is a parking lot. I have a big problem with that, fundamentally or otherwise.
Which is why we talked about eliminating that possibility.
Right. So is that where we're at? I see 3 heads nodding over here. So, commissioners, do we need further input from the residents, or are we pretty much agreed that off-site, remote, dedicated lot isn't a good use in this area, doesn't meet the vision?
Not a good use in
doesn't contribute to what we're trying to preserve.
Right.
That looks unanimous. Very good. All right, I had that as number 4 on that list, but you can put it in wherever you want. You've got 7?
I'm down to 7 with
Okay.
this very strange assemblature. Okay, good. Anything else that we haven't talked about, people thought about?
I think that seemingly that covers it till we, and
You know what I'd like to see, though? Would you mind, just what you have up there, typing it up in such a way that there's a lot of space so that when people come in, they can look at it, they can make notes on it, and then we have something like this on the whiteboard, and literally have them go up and put either yes or no on some of these things, so we get an idea of how many are for it. I mean, I want to see some decisions from them. I don't want them to just sit there and talk to us for an hour, because I want to see some.
Yeah, well, I think that's why we're putting this together, so we've got some concrete to take and say,
I agree.
here's what we're thinking in terms of vision, what that means, and are we on the right track, so. Okay.
Are you biting your tongue, Sergio?
Hey, oh, no, I was actually thinking that it'd be a great thing to have a dot exercise, like put out a statement, strongly agree, strongly
Little
disagree.
Delphi going on.
Yeah, and let people put their dot wherever they want.
I agree. I think that that'd be the way to go. I mean, I don't want to have a lot of conversation on it.
Yeah.
I want to hear from them.
Right.
did that give you some idea of the agenda for the meeting?
Sure does.
The questions?
Absolutely, that's good.
If not, I have to give you the 2-minute warning for this first one. All right. Then,
No, not necessarily an uh-oh. It's just, I'm trying to anticipate.
okay.
Okay, so we've listed the characteristics, criteria, whatever, that we've been talking about so that the residents can give us some feedback on it.
Right.
Are we going to be inviting introduction of new criteria, restrictions, et cetera, that we should be considering?
I want to give them the option. If they come up with stuff, let them put them down on a miscellaneous or whatever you want to call
Number
it.
8, is there anything else?
We could provide blank spaces and then let everybody vote on those as well.
All I'm worried about is discussion that requests that we do things that we can't really do as a planning commission or as a city. I just don't want to waste their time or ours
Right.
talking about a lot of that. So as long as somebody is ready to say, admirable goal, nothing we can do.
Right.
Okay.
All right. How's this for a segue? Then, item 3 on our agenda is the Littleton pedestrian lighting plan.
I love this lighting plan. I can hardly wait to get my little
Can we
paws
see
on
it? Oh.
It's right there. This is it.
That's it?
You should walk up there
It's a little
and
hard
look
to
at
see
it.
from back there, probably. You might need to come up and see it.
You
Yeah.
need to go and look at it. I highly recommend it.
Okay, so here is, this is Bellevue, this is the railroad,
Where the
this is the
lights are
river,
going to
Santa
go.
Fe.
What's green is where they are.
This is Littleton Boulevard, Main Street, Alamo, Bowles coming through. The green is showing where lights exist, where they've been installed. And in every case, these are Sternbergs, yeah, so these are the Acorn lights. And in the red is showing where they're proposed to go and where the plan is. So they're all through this area, north and west. Those were put in at the request of the developer. They're all along Bowles out to the west, all along Littleton Boulevard out to Windermere. Stop at Windermere, and the plan does not go beyond that. They're along Alamo and Main, and Main Street's north and south to the south of Main Street, and scattered throughout other places. So there are some others that have been installed as developments occurred, or has there's been other programs, street repaving or something else. The one that's not showing right now is it as they're currently on this first block of Rio Grande. They'll be going in the second and third blocks as well, as that's repaved in the next couple of months. So you'll see them as well. So.
The only thing that might be helpful with that map, I think, would be if somehow you overlaid what's residential and what's, what the zoning is, what's primarily business and what's primarily residential.
At this point, the only, oh, thank you. The only purely residential, the R5, as close as we get, is this section in here, of course, this northwest section of downtown. The rest of this is all mixed-use CA, all of this. And then we do have all residential, of course, coming out to the west and to the east. And, of course, this is all this is residential to the south, and then we have commercial up with the new shopping center to the north and east of Prince as it goes up to Bellevue. And, again, the idea was to create this sense of this is Littleton, this is the character and some continuity. So when you come in on Bowles from Lakewood and from Jefferson County, you hit that stretch and you say this is different. The street feels different. I've got the pedestrian lights. I've got, again, they also did fences along here. They've got the street trees. It's a narrower street. It's got the median. So it feels very different. And the sense was when they did the redevelopment of the streetscaping program on Littleton Boulevard, they stopped with the pedestrian lights at what they considered the end of Old Town, Littleton, which was Windermere. And the east of that, they've got the detached sidewalks, the street trees, the median, but not the pedestrian lights. That's the only thing they're missing to the east of that.
David?
So each dot represent a light?
Each dot represents a light. Yes, exactly. Dave? Yeah. Oh, Jenny, I'm sorry.
Actually, when looking at this, there's a grid forming right here, and there's a concentration of the lights, and it makes I'm more inclined to fill in the gaps of this grid as well as strengthen our gateways, because we talked about Prince being another gateway, and yet we aren't doing right now. There's just a couple lights here, so as well as you've got the lights over here, but then they trickle off, and then as you come close to our gateway from Santa Fe, there's nothing.
Well, no, but that's what they're proposing. The red line is saying
Right.
we're going to add more lights along there.
Right. But that should be more of the focus in the future, is like that there's a hierarchy, so that our residential neighborhood here, I mean, there's no reason for us to be putting lights here when we don't have lights on Prince yet. We don't have lights filling in here on Curtis. So seems like there's a hierarchy to get.
I think it's a good point. Historically, the way this has been funded, as I understand it, is with major street reconstruction projects or major development projects. So that's the way we've gotten the funding, rather than having a citywide program where we do a capital improvement where we go out and just say, let's do the lights by themselves. So I think that's probably where we've got this pattern. It'd be interesting to think about, is that a recommendation you guys want to make in terms of actually having a more proactive implementation for where you think it's appropriate?
I guess in order to answer that, I need to get answers to two questions. One, are these lights intended to define a traditional historic core of downtown, the central area, regardless of whether it's retail, office, residential? That's the first question.
Okay.
I mean, is that the intention? We're trying to define character. We're not differentiating use or activities in the area.
It's got two purposes, I think, and I think the primary one is to define downtown and the character of downtown. Say this, you're now in downtown. It is spread out, in terms of it's over here, in terms of as this redeveloped from the,
that would be weird.
as this came in, this is more an announcement. You're in Littleton, and this was again, I think you're in Littleton too. So.
Then my
it's more
second-
Littleton than downtown, so it's a little bit too.
Then my second question is, aside
Like
from
that.
the goal of the appearance and consistency and pattern, whatever, has any thought been given to varying intensity, spacing, or shielding between commercial and residential? Because if not, it's a pretty one-dimensional plan.
Yeah, and my understanding from talking to Charlie is that is definitely it's something he's very open to. Is we get into residential and when we had the negotiation with the dental clinic in terms of how many do they have to put in, that's kind of where he was heading as well in terms of is fewer lights in that area. So he's open to that, and talking to him after that meeting as well. When you get into residential, he'd see fewer. You still think it's important to have downtown as a whole have them, so you have that overall definition of downtown, that overall character, and that continuity in downtown, partially so that if you're over here, you don't feel devalued in terms of why did I not get them. I think I feel connected to downtown. I'm
I
part
could
of
say the
this.
same
So
thing for the people to the east
sure.
of the trails.
Although I think
Why is it, you got the courthouse right there, and why don't you have, you didn't, I'm pretty sure they come up in the homes.
So in the historic district or something
Some
like
of it
that.
anyway. I guess my point is, if we're talking about the appearance of the fixtures, daytime, nighttime, or otherwise, okay, that's one thing. That's one, and I don't think anybody in the neighborhood is going to object to the appearance of the fixtures. The question is, when you start looking at the quality of the light, the intensity level, the direction, that sort of thing, if we don't differentiate the activities going on in the area and what the lighting is supposed to do in terms of making it safer for pedestrians, bicycles, safer for traffic in general, without impinging on the enjoyment of a residential
And
property,
Craig and
we're missing a
Sergey,
bet.
I know more about this than I do, but my understanding from pedestrian lights typically is they're not ever thought as adding to safety of the street itself. I mean, that's what the street lights do. This adds to a sense of comfort level for pedestrians. It's the sense that, it's comfortable, it feels good, it feels traditional, and so it's more of that rather than actual, lighting up an area. The light quality itself is pretty minimal typically. Yeah, so.
I would like to go maybe flip this thing over from our standpoint of talking about it, because I agree with David. This existing plan is extremely one-dimensional. Whatever the reasoning was to create this plan, that's what you get. And I agree. I think that the issues that there should be a differentiation between commercial and residential. I think there should be some thought about entry points, and that's another thing. And if all those means that it needs to be phased or rethought or something along those lines, I think that needs to be thought about. There's, from my standpoint, the old neighborhood, I would eliminate it from this lighting plan because of the fact I want it to be a residential area like all the other residential areas in the city of Littleton. I think that it has its own status of, it's been here the longest. Why should it create a different venue that I don't think people are really going to like? And that's my own personal opinion. Until I hear differently, I'll be more than happy to, I will stick with that position just because of what I've seen. And I'll quit shortly. But I think that one of the things that became very apparent to me is that...
Hang on. You'll need the mic.
Mike's right there.
Ah, here it is. There.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I would have broken this thing out into phases. I guess that's what I'm looking at here. This would be phase one to me, and if the next paramount thing is to do exactly what Jenny said earlier was on Prince Street, I'd do that. I would do this. But I don't know about this area. You have residential in this, even in the CA. I would like to know what the people think about that are even outside of the quote-unquote R5 area. There's folks living here. I don't know if they want to see those lights and if they're obnoxious or not. I'm not in a position to really say. Either are they yet, but if all of a sudden they get one of those suckers right in front of their window, I'm pretty sure they'll have a lot to say. And then it's all of a sudden too late. I'd rather go and see if we can kind of get maybe from my standpoint, I'd probably think phasing, because it's somewhat dysfunctional right now. But I'd say phasing for all of this. I don't even know what this is about. I'll be honest with you. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. Talk about dysfunctional.
It's an attempt to get people from the riverfront that's not the name of it, over across the bridge toward downtown, tie them in
And to
to
ground
downtown.
house.
Well, and I think the idea was to make it feel, residential, and to make it feel like Littleton. I don't know how many of you walked over there a lot or driven over there a lot, but it does have a different sense because of that. Because it does feel a little more connected, I think. So I think that's what they were trying to achieve. So again, the whole discussion is premised on the fact that it's really, we can make a recommendation in terms of what you'd like to see for character, but it's really out of the purview of the Planning Commission. It really belongs to Public Works, but again, we can make that recommendation. So.
Oh, yeah.
Steve.
Okay, a couple questions I've got is the Littleton pedestrian lighting plan. What is that part of? Is that part of the downtown design standards, or is it?
No, it's actually, it's part of the Public Works. They have street plans, they have all that, they have a street improvement plan, so it's connected to that, because it's public right-of-way. So it gets into, what's the priority for streets, how wide are those streets, what do they look like, what do the sidewalks look like? So they really have, a whole plan for what's the,
Okay, another
what's the
question.
right-of-way look like.
Another question I got is,
Question.
if they're being added in there as part of when somebody is doing a development or a redevelopment or something, and the developer is actually paying for the Sternberg to go up, who actually pays for the maintenance of the lights?
The city does.
The
city
city.
pays for the maintenance.
Okay.
So the electricity and the maintenance is.
So if a couple of teenage kids come flying on through with BB guns, the city is then replacing all them globes?
I believe that's true. I'm not sure that's true, but I think so. My understanding is we've not had that issue, amazingly. Yeah, I don't think it's happened in the years it's been up, so, but I think it is the city's responsibility.
I think cars hitting them, particularly down there on the corner of the, Prince and Alamo seems to be fairly frequent.
Dennis, did I hear you say that these Sternberg lights aren't really intended to provide much in the way of lighting for pedestrians or whatever? That's mainly coming from the street lights, which implies that these are strictly for effect. It looks traditional.
I mean, I asked Craig and Sarah Jane, but that's typically what I've understood pedestrian lights is, that the light quality is really more a comfort level, more a sense of kind of that aesthetic, whereas the actual light, you want is going to be for intersections or places will be by the overhead lights. They actually present, because they don't have a lot of light. They don't have a lot of wattage with them.
If you're in downtowns, like for instance, I did the lighting plan for lower downtown Denver when I worked on that. The ambient light is provided by the hockey pucks or the overheads. And that's where your light levels for safety and traffic and all of that are calculated.
So the Sternbergs are strictly for aesthetic effect.
Well, I think that it's not correct to say that. I think they do add more light, and they do add a sense of safety, and I'm going to look to Craig to confirm that. But the actual light levels for traffic loads and so forth come from your overhead lights.
I guess what I'm getting at is if it is primarily for the aesthetic effect, there is some nominal minor contribution to overall lighting. But that would suggest that we could very easily vary the lighting levels and the direction in a residential area to accommodate the residential nature of the activities.
Absolutely. I think typically what it does, it kind of announces it's a pedestrian area. It's comfortable. It's comfortable to walk there, and people. And I don't know how many of the neighbors actually are walking at this point, but over time they probably will be more. It just says that it is comfortable to do that. And you go into other neighborhoods in the metropolitan area that have those, and that was the intent, was to say this is a walkable neighborhood. And it does add, as Sarah Jane said, a little bit more light, but it's in pools of light. So it's that sense more than the reality, I think, of the perception.
Yeah, they're not purely decorative. There is a light function. However, there's a much higher efficiency of light function with the hockey pucks or the higher that are directed downward, and especially with these Sternberg lights, it's a sort of a glow. It leaks out all over. So,
a couple of things, if I can interject. On the way over here, I drove down Nevada, past the new Nevada Place, where the Sternberg style are in place now, and the next block north of that does not have those and has, I would say, very minimal street lighting. And thought about the fact that if you were choosing which to walk down or which your child or your wife and child would be walking down, the Sternberg lights do offer enough light that you can see if maybe there's 2 or 3 people standing a few feet off the sidewalk, and you would be aware of them, whereas that next block down, that wasn't the effect. If it came to reading street signs or signs in front of a business or something, they may not provide that kind of light. The other thing I wanted to note, and maybe we can find out a little more about it, from an acquaintance, I understand that Louisville has the same style of light, although they stop abruptly when they encounter a residential area. And I would be interested to know what their lighting plan, if they have one in place, how they went about it. So that might be something that the staff could look at.
Well, it is a pedestrian lighting plan, so you want to put the lights where the pedestrians are. And there's going to be a heck of a lot more pedestrians in a mixed-use or commercial or Nevada Place scale area than there would be in a single-family residential neighborhood. So,
Julio?
I would like to know, beyond this plan that we have on the board, is there any other criteria that Public Works has come up with beyond just this diagram? In other words, do they have any specificity, or where's the details of?
My assumption would be, again, my guess would be, having dealt with similar situations, is that it's a case-by-case basis. When you get in, you've got to find out where all the utilities are, you've got to find out where the existing trees are, where the curb cuts are. So the placement really varies depending on the individual location. So they don't have a very specific plan in terms of it goes every 35 feet. I think they have a general plan in terms of their spacing every 75 feet.
Is there something written down? That's what I'm kind of getting.
There are.
Let me take it the next level.
Yeah, I don't know.
For a guy who doesn't fish, I really like opening cans of worms, but I'm going to bring this one up. We've heard at least 3 of the last 4 meetings from staff, comments about, well, that's not really Planning Commission's purview. That's not right. If you're suggesting that Planning Commission, when reviewing an application for a rezoning or a PDO, is not to be looking at things going on in the street right away with public utilities, I understand that. But to take that further and say that in considering the comprehensive plan for the city, the Planning Commission should not be addressing issues like that, I think we have a major divergence of intention.
No, I agree.
Okay.
It's definitely something you put in the plan.
Okay.
And again, it's kind of intent, which I think you need to pull back in terms of, and I think where you're going in terms of what's the character you want for the residential areas, what's the overall quality. So I think that's very appropriate. I think we don't want to get into technical details.
Linda?
Can we add lighting to the agenda with a meeting with the old downtown neighborhood?
That's what I was going to ask also. We'll go back to the last item and say, let's talk about lighting with them. All right, good job. Anything else?
I'd just like to support the notion that there should be a recommendation in the plan about this pedestrian lighting plan for the central area, that there should be a hierarchy established in the lighting, that it should prioritize filling in the gaps and reinforcing the gateways into the city.
It's as much a part of the environment as building form, streets, sidewalk, dimensions, locations, tree lawns.
Talk about it. Oh, go ahead.
Jen?
And also, the full cutoff fixtures, I know Craig, and just working in architecture as well, I mean, when you're working on a project, you typically have to deal with the full cutoff fixtures where the light's directed downward, not spilling out up and over. I mean, there's the partial cutoff that just get light. I mean, it certainly spills out a lot more, but the full cutoff puts it right where it needs to go. So, I mean, there's obviously ways that in residential or different areas that we look at, addressing getting the light where it needs to go rather than spilling out.
And we don't have to get into foot candles and everything else. Those are technical issues. Staff is perfectly competent for doing that, as they are with a lot of the other parameters we're talking about. But as far as general intent, cautions as well as limitations, that's what we're doing the comprehensive plan for.
Well, lighting to me is one of those things that, in this particular case, I would like to see. This is something that's, again, citywide, because when we have more than all the entrances are not just here for the city. I mean, if that's the case, I could see this, the Sternbergs, if you will, from Broadway at County Line north for a fair amount of area, because again, that's an entrance to the city through one of our major corridors. I could see it even on Littleton Boulevard from Broadway all the way down to Main Street. I mean, that's another, if you want to keep that going. The point that I'm trying to make is, I think that if we're going to do a lighting, if we want to see a lighting plan, it needs to be for the entire city, not just one aspect of where we want to see these kinds of characters or characteristics represented through this.
And we can contribute to that as we go through neighborhood by neighborhood on the comprehensive plan, talk about the character of lighting and the impact of the lighting, et cetera, as we're doing with the central area.
Let me just ask one quick question. Does anybody have an update on the score from the Bronco game? What is it?
Broncos are behind 21-7.
Oh, okay. There you go, guys. This is the place to be. And we're ahead by 10 minutes.
Good.
Let's keep it up.
Your comments about overall city lighting plan, I think we acknowledged as we go area to area, there's some items that go into the overview of the comprehensive plan, and there you have it. So have we digested that thoroughly?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Great.
We can say that as a bin list item for the overall comprehensive plan?
Exactly. All right. Item number 4, interestingly enough, is distribution and directions for reviewing the draft plan. And I think we've got a draft to hand out.
It's okay, we can open this later.
Because this is a very rough draft, I think you've got it as perhaps 75% in place.
Right.
With acknowledged gaps. We do not have this on the web. We do not have it available quite yet for all of the general public. The second piece is a template, so maybe our comments and criteria and critical review sort of has the same format, so it can be integrated.
Yeah, again, we're really shooting to try and finalize and get this to public hearing before Planning Commission and also to City Council for adoption. And so the thought is, let's try and standardize our comments to the extent we possibly can, so that Sarah Jane and I can incorporate those, and so we can, expend as few of the city's resources, I think, as possible at this point, trying to consolidate and get what you're saying into this document, and what we've heard from the neighbors throughout the entire process. So we've got some short answer questions that we'd like you to go through and answer, 8 of those, and then additional questions down below, which are they look like essay questions. If you can do those as bullets, that'd be even better. So just consolidate and really synthesize what you're trying to say, what you think is key here. If you can think, and we've got another down at number 13, if there's something we missed in terms of comments, criteria for what you'd like to look at, we'd appreciate that as well. But I've gone back through the files for all the meetings that we've had with the Planning Commission and with the neighbors and with City Council. And one thing that really stood out from City Council multiple times was, let's make this a simple plan, let's make this as clear as possible, and that's been the goal that Sergey and I have been really focusing on, is how do we consolidate all this phenomenal discussion we've had, all these ideas, and so what we're really looking for is there something major that we've left out, again with the understanding that this doesn't have to be the Bible, this doesn't have to be all-inclusive, but we really need to make sure we capture the big ideas and it captures the sense of that, because the way the plan is used is very close to the intent statement. You get the idea and then you actually run with that and have a lot more discussion when you get into implementation, whether it's a change to the zoning or a change to the standards and guidelines, or change to process or capital improvements or review of individual projects. So we want to make sure we've got the idea. And to some degree, I think what the council was saying, and I agree with them, that the more we've been successful in consolidating this information and making this fairly brief, the easier it is for people to latch on to and remember and carry forward. So it's like poetry. And I wouldn't dare to say that this is poetry, but other than the fact that you try and take the essence of the ideas and you really consolidate that down, so that you try and make it as essential information as possible. So that's what we're heading for. What we were hoping for, if you can get your responses back to us by next Monday, a week from today, then Sergey and I have 2 weeks to try and work those in to the plan. And we'll, again, on December 6th, have a meeting with the neighborhood. Then we'll meet again with you on the 13th. We would like to have that all consolidated in there by the 13th. We would like to think about, can we get to a public hearing? We're going to have, Julio's term limited, he's leaving. We've been working on this since March of 2008. I think we've gotten almost, hopefully, all the ideas out there on the table, and I think we all have a really thorough understanding of what the issues are. But we want to make sure that we use the same route going forward, and that we get through Planning Commission and City Council if we possibly can. So there is speed is of the essence to some degree in terms of trying to finish this up and get it to council, so that we don't bring somebody in new. I think that's a hard thing to do, who hasn't had all the years of discussion that you've had on this. So not to put an artificial time frame on it, but I think realistically, you know, we've had a lot of discussion, so hopefully we've covered it. So if you find major things, yes.
Hey, let me interject. Just in case, commissioners, you missed it, on the back of the page where it says draft, there's commentary about the photos shown after the framework will be inserted, and so on and so forth. So that kind of describes what you're looking at and where it is. The implementation tables at the back do not have all of the actions inserted yet, so be sure and read that and then start to go through that review template. Oh,
Just from the standpoint of schedule, it sounds like we've moved on to schedule. So we have some better idea of the practical limitations. Julio's term expires March 31st?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Obviously, we're not going to do much with this in terms of real action before January. So what realistic opportunities do we have January, February, and March? And primarily what I'm thinking is what kind of constraints, what kind of availability does City Council have? I mean, they're going to be busy in that time too. So.
Well, my understanding of the discussion with you before is we will have a public hearing here and then go to public hearing. I don't know that you were talking about another study session to go back to them before that. And so I think that's the.
No, I'm just thinking, what time are they going to have to even look at this, much less, feed in with the public review sessions and that sort of thing? Are they going to be so jammed up in those 3 months?
Doesn't look like it at this point. At this point, you have a couple cases coming forward, so you may have some constraints in January, but no different than we've had probably in terms of schedule. I think most of your schedule will be open as well.
So can we rough out the steps and then worry about fitting them in time-wise later, but right now at least get the steps listed?
Yeah. What we'd like to do is, we've got, I need to write this down for everybody, and I apologize, I haven't done that. But we are looking at the meeting on December 6th, which is the neighborhood meeting. We're coming back here on December 13th. And that will be, let's look at this draft again. Sergey and I have incorporated your comments into. We're hoping at that point that we've got something you guys are comfortable enough with. You could say, let's start looking at taking this to staff review and getting comments from the different departments, and then get ready to put that out for notice for you. So by the end of January, possibly have a public hearing for Planning Commission. Once you've had your public hearing, you guys actually adopt the City Council, the comprehensive plan. It then goes to City Council for ratification of your adoption. So you actually have the authority to adopt it. They ratify it. It's a very similar process. They have a public hearing, and that follows as well. And to some degree, those can overlap in terms of notification and stuff. You're taking some chance. I mean, the ideal is you have your approval at public hearing before you advertise for City Council, so you make sure that it's going forward.
let me suggest a couple of things. First, I think it would be appropriate at this point, if we need to, that, and I kind of think the commissioners might be willing to schedule an additional meeting to get it done by then, depending on the hearings that may come forward, and take up regular meetings or special study sessions that turn into regular meetings. The other part of it, kind of going back to this, was the editing. There are some different mechanisms for peer review and editing, so we don't have to try to wordsmith it. I believe, and although I understand she may not be watching, so we can volunteer her, that Kelly Nardi has agreed to go through it and edit it. And we kind of thought that, I guess it would be helpful for somebody that hasn't been quite so close and isn't involved full-time in planning to do some editing on it, just, understanding that what we've looked at so many times and what the planners inherently see may not be comprehensive. So there are a couple factors there. Did that cover what you, so.
That's great. And again, if Kelly cannot do it for schedule doesn't allow, we've talked about some other folks that might be able to do it for us as well, so.
How much time do we need to allow between doing our final review, edit, reformulation, get a final draft out there, and actually having the hearing? I mean, we're going to put this out for people to review. They aren't just going to show up that night and go through it. So how much time do we need to allow?
Safely, we should take like 4 weeks probably.
Okay.
For both of us. So you get the word out. We have the drafts available, online. We have some hard copy of the drafts so people can actually see it, so actually read through it and get comfortable. So they know what their comments are going to be at the public hearing. And then there's always the potential that you may hear things at the public hearing you want to incorporate as well. And so if that's the case, then there would be an additional time between your public hearing and city council.
So if I'm following this right and trying to think logically through what has to happen, if we meet on the 13th to talk about what we hear from the residents in the R5, it's all well and good to say that you guys are going to finish up trying to do the redraft from the comments we have and all that, but it is going to be the holidays.
Right.
So the earliest it's going to get back to us for reconsideration is going to be sometime early in January, which means if we allow 4 weeks, if assuming everything goes smoothly and we say, great job, thanks a lot, we can go home and catch the Broncos again. No, we won't. That's January. They won't be playing.
And we have
That still means 4 weeks for public circulation review. That really takes us to early February for a public hearing.
and then early March, if depending on.
Maybe late February if we have no major glitches we have to retool.
Right.
Okay.
We still have left open that meeting on December 27th, if that works for people, so there's potential that we could do that as well. So.
We may need that if we get some input December 6th. I think we'll
we may
probably
lose some people for that. Yeah.
I think we'll know that on the 13th.
Sure.
See where we are.
All right, we kind of got into schedule there, which was the fifth item on our agenda tonight. Anything else about, any questions, I guess, or anything about the, what is the review template? Great.
Yeah, I guess just to be clear, I think you were pretty clear, but I just wanted to confirm my natural tendency would be to go through here with a red pen and start to mark this up. But I think what you're looking is to avoid that, so it's simpler and to stick to the checklist here. Okay.
Possibly can. And I know it's hard not to. And we really intend to have, we'll catch that and we'll have other people catching that for us as well. So we really appreciate your time being spent on concepts.
But I'd like to say it's really come together quite nice. It's a lot farther along than I expected to see it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'd say that
So
too.
it's, in
Great.
terms of organization, I haven't gotten the content yet, but it looks really good.
Great. Oh, super. Thank you. Brenda, do you?
One of the things that we're trying to do by going through the template and so that we can compare one to the other is, because I've, as you have done many of these, where you lose time and where you spend your resources that you don't need to spend your resources is when you think you got everything, you format it all up, and then somebody wants to make a major change, you have to do all that work over again. So we're trying to get the content standing still and only go through the formatting once. And then if we need to go back and fix it, hopefully it's minor and we don't have to start over. So that's kind of the approach.
Which is why it's not
You
formatted
can
at this
edit
point,
it
so,
with your red pen afterwards if you want. It'll make you feel better.
We'll probably have to do it as we go and then consolidate it
Right,
into the comments.
exactly, exactly.
Right. I think we've dealt with upcoming schedule fairly thoroughly. It'd be great if we can hold to that. Wrap up in upcoming meetings. We kind of got upcoming meetings in with the schedule. I had one thing maybe falls under wrap up, if you'll indulge me for a moment. If you got a chance to look at the agenda, the first one included a section for public comment, much as City Council has their 4 minutes for unscheduled. Then had a discussion with the city attorney, I think she initiated it actually, regarding how to go about that. Last time we kind of just said, well, let's have some input. We had a citizen, and I think to our credit, we were willing to listen, but we need to formalize that process. So we either need to change our rules of procedure to include that as part of our study sessions, or we need to take a vote if we are interested in having input in any particular session. So I think probably we could, when the city attorney is here at whatever meeting upcoming, maybe we should discuss that a little bit,
That's a great idea.
if that sounds good.
Yeah, and I think everybody has a copy of the rules, for planning commission. So basically, what my understanding of what she was saying was we need to just have that in the rules as to how we proceed. By leaving it silent, we really are kind of putting ourselves in a bind. So, but she had a couple options for how to proceed with doing that.
Because, I mean,
She apologized for not being, she's off today. So.
in some strange world, it's possible that we would have 10 people show up and want to discuss something during one of our study sessions, and Lord knows it's hard enough, although we're doing well tonight, to get through all the discussion items we have. That all being said, let's have a consideration of that in the future. For tonight, if you would like to entertain a 4 to 5 minute maximum presentation, I guess, from Ms. Chadbourne, who is here. She would like to say something about lighting, and I guess what I would like to hear is a motion and a second, and then we'll vote as to whether we want to include a public comment section tonight, and if we don't, then we'll just put it off until we have some formal process.
You have your public meeting.
I'm sorry?
You have your public meeting next week.
Well, we have our public meeting next week also, and we did include lighting about that, so,
Week after next.
yes, December 6th, whenever that is.
Sorry, 2 weeks.
So, with that said, is there a motion to have a maximum 5-minute public comment tonight?
So moved.
You've got a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it and see how, so that we can have a vote and see what your feeling is. All right. Motion and second for a maximum of 5-minute public comment regarding, I believe, lighting, maybe something else. All those in favor, raise a hand. Okay. Okay. I got 4 in favor, I believe. Although Jenny is functioning only as an alternate, right? Tonight, and Craig is taking the position of Pablo. So that's actually 3 for it and 4 it does not pass, and so we will defer that until next week's. I'm still saying that. I'll probably be down here next week by myself, won't I? All right. Is there anything else?
Yeah, a couple of things.
Okay.
Something I don't have on here, December 9th, Thursday, December 9th, Historic Preservation Board is going to have a public meeting on the historic design guidelines. Those will be on the website next week, and they will also have hard copies. So that's going to be Thursday, December 9th, 7 p.m. in this room. And again, they're historic district design guidelines for the Main Street Historic District. So definitely, I think, of interest to us. And she'll have a copy, hard copy for Craig as well as our liaison. So we'll get that next week.
Is that something that has to come back to the planning commission for review, since it's,
Depends on how they do it, I think, because the ones we have currently are adopted by both planning commission and city council. If it ends up being an amendment, I would think so. If it ends up being something separate, and I think they're still debating, I think, with Suzanne and Kirsten, what the best way to do it. They're thinking, I think, that the best way may be to actually have them adopted as part of their own rules and regs, which would be a little separate, but we may need to think about it, how do we actually then reference it in ours?
Because if it's going to come before us, we would be recommended to not go to it, correct?
I don't think not go to the public
No,
meeting.
it's not really
I wouldn't
quasi-judicial.
think so, yeah, it's not quasi-judicial. I think you should go, yeah, I would encourage you to go, I think, actually, in that case, for information, so, yeah, I think you'd be okay.
How would it come to us? It would come as a presentation from them.
It comes as a presentation from them, and then I think what happened last time was it then was adopted by them initially, and then adopted by planning commission. So it was adopted by both of them.
Why don't you have the city attorney or the assistant
Yeah.
let us know for sure whether it would be proper for us to be there and whether it,
And we'll let you know, okay?
okay, good question. Now, we completely interrupted you. You had another item.
I've got a couple more, actually. I've got, one of the things that was handed out to the Historic Preservation Board was an article on zoning and historic preservation, and city councilman, who is liaison, Phil Serhanik, was very impressed with the article and asked that we pass it out to you as well. So here are copies of that. And then also asked to be passed out to city council, so they'll be getting copies. And then there was one more article in the Denver Business Journal last week, which I thought you might find of interest too. It was talking about the change in legislation that was passed last year at the state, which allows for a little bit more flexibility with RTD being able to work with municipalities and developers in developing their light rail sites and their parking lots. So something we've been talking about, but it has loosened up quite a bit, and this is a pretty good article kind of talking about what the implications of that are. So that's all I have.
All right, very good. I think that covers it. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
wait,
I'm sorry, Linda.
can we get this review template in the
Electronic?
email so that
Sure.
I can type my comments? or-
Absolutely, you bet.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes, that would be great for all of us here.
Just send a stenographer by.
Yeah, really.
All right, good point.
Yeah, very good point, thank you. That's definitely.
All right.
And I will send you also a copy of the draft, too, so I think it's well, I guess we can't do that because
Send it to us
it's
in
not
Word,
all.
so we can do it in graph text.
Yeah, I don't think, actually it doesn't work just because of the way the formats are, it's not going to work at this point. Not yet. I'll get you the template, though.
PDF.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe as the next intermediate step after we get past this meeting with the neighborhood and do, near final draft as we're going through. It'd be easier than you getting handwritten comments or markups.
Right.
Maybe that's a natural limiting device. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
And a
Second.
Very good. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.